So good day everyone. So I'm here to share some details and understanding about our topic. So our topic for today is human trafficking and human rights in migration. So based on my research and understanding also, in human trafficking there are five major types of human trafficking. So first is trafficking for forced labor. Most of the victims of this pervasive kind of trafficking are from developing nations. They are enlisted in traffic by means of trickery and coercion, and they end up working a variety of tasks under slave condition. So the second one is trafficking for forced criminal activities. So this kind of trafficking enables criminal organization to profit from a range of illegal activities without taking any chances. A variety of unlawful activities are forced upon victims, and these acts serve as a source of cash. So the third one is trafficking in women for sexual exploitations. So every part of the world is impacted by this pervasive kind of trafficking, whether it is a source, transit, or destination nation. Promises of descent, employment, tempt women and children from poor countries and weak social groups in affluent countries to leave their homes and travel to what they believe what would be a better life. So the first one is trafficking for the removal of organs. So long transplant waiting lists exist in many nations. So when criminals have taken advantage of these situations to prey on desperate patients and potential donors, the health of the victims and potentially their lives are in danger because surgeries could be performed under covered circumstances without any medical follow-up. So the fifth one is people smuggling. So people smuggling is a problem that is closely related to human trafficking because many migrants may be subjected to forced labor during their travels. Smugglers may make migrants labor terrible hours in exchange. So for payment for their illegal cross-border travel. Then who the traffickers control the situation? So who is a vulnerable? So anybody can become a victim of human trafficking. But certain people are more susceptible than others. Recent migration or relocation, substance abuse, mental health issues, participation with the child welfare system, and being a runaway or homeless teenager are all significant risk factors. Traffickers frequently spot and exploit the weakness of their victims to establish dependency. So who are the traffickers? The perpetrators of human trafficking are as diverse as the survivors and come from all racial, ethnic, and gender groups. So while others endure some socioeconomic oppression as their victims, some exploit their privilege, riches, and power as way of control. They include people, company owners, gang or network members, victims, parents or family members, partners in romantic relationship, proprietors of farms or eateries, as well as a senior corporate executive and government officials. So how do traffickers control the victims? Traffickers use a number of restraint techniques, but the most prevalent ones include separation from friends and family, physical and emotional abuse and threats. They claim to take care of their targets' requirements in effort to exert control. Consequently, victims are imprisoned and terrified to leave for a variety of reasons, such as psychological trauma, so humiliation, emotional attachment, or physical threats to themselves or their family. So who are the survivors? So every race and ethnicity is represented among the victims and survivors of human trafficking. However, some types of trafficking are more likely to target particular ethnic groups. So next is human rights in migration. By virtue of their humanity, migrants are accorded human rights under international law. Since international human rights treaties customary law have worldwide applicability. They define the obligation of states towards migration and their rights. There are numerous additional international agreements that deal explicitly with the rights and protection. So, in addition, the responsibilities of states under international human rights law towards migrants who have died or gone missing and their families have recently come to light. So, by conferring the rights given to migrants in theory and practice, it is possible to assist the rights that migrants have access to. The former is fairly simple and examines whether states have ratified international and regional treaties and their national laws to respect, protect, and fulfill the rights of migrants. Whereas the letter requires examination of the actual application of rights or whether migrants' rights are actually upheld and exercised. Because of lack of data, information, and resources, as well as the sheer number of rights that need to be evaluated, it is difficult to assess the rights granted to migrants and how effectively they are accessed in daily life.
This is Deck Cadet Ronald Julius B. Blanco reporting what is human trafficking. So, what is human trafficking? Human trafficking, also known as trafficking in person, is a crime that involves compiling or coercing a person to provide labor or service or to engage in commercial sex act. The coercion can be subtle or overt, physical, psychological. Men, women, and children of all ages and from all background can become victim of this crime, which occur in every region of the world. The traffickers often use violence or fraudulent employment agencies and fake promises of education and job opportunities to trick and coerce the victim. So, traffickers prey in other weakness, unfortunate circumstance, unfamiliarly, and inexperienced. They are trained to identify vulnerable and expert manipulated tactic to persuade and control their victims. So, number one, poverty. Someone living in poverty who struggle daily in a perfect target for traffickers since he is vulnerable situation. He might be offered a job, and if this appears to be his only option, he may accept and be willing to do whatever the trafficker asked of him. So number two is unemployment. Traffickers target unemployed individuals and often use deception to persuade them to leave home and take a job in another city or country, which promising positions that is far from from the truth. So lack of knowledge or experience, inexperience may lead individual down a path that ends in exploitation. A teenage who is approached by traffickers may accept an attractive job offer, saying it is a great opportunity at such a young age. An immigration who arrive in a foreign country may not understand his or her rights, may be unfamiliar with the motion of law. So number four, broken families. So broken families, individuals who are cast out of their homes and abandoned or placed in the child welfare system are highly vulnerable of human trafficking. Runway, you experience homelessness, and those who live in isolation are often targeted. When someone feels alone or involved or has been abused in the past. So, cultural practice. In some societies, it is widely accepted to be devalue and abuse women and children. This outlook is ingrained into the minds of men and women in certain cultures, which creates a huge opportunities for truckers. Some girls and women may leave home willing if they have been raised to believe they are unequal to men or have few opportunities for work and advancement of their own communities. So that's
Examples of human trafficking. The first is the sexual exploitations. Actual or attempted abuse of position of vulnerability, power, or trust for sexual purposes, including but not limited to profiting monetarily, socially, or politically from the sexual exploitation of another. The next is the forced labor, in which people are employed against their will with a threat of destitution, detention, violence, including death or other forms of extreme hardship to either themselves or members of their families. The next is debt bondage. There's any work relation, especially in a modern or early modern history, which people are employed against their will, with against the threat of destitution, detention, violence, including death, or other forms of extreme hardships to either themselves or members of their families. The next is the domestic servitude. This is a type of forced labor whereby the victim is usually expected to work in around a person's home, everybody, and be on call like 24 hours a day. This type of slavery can affect spouse, partner, child, family member, complete stranger. The next is the organ removal. It is a broad concept that includes several illegal activities with which main goal is to profit from the human organ and tissues. For the sole purpose of the transplantation, these activities include THBOR, transplant tourism, and trafficking in organs and tissues. The next is the forced marriage. It is a marriage in which one or more of the parties is married without their consent or against their will. A marriage can also become a forced marriage even if both parties with full consent if one or both or later forced to stay in the marriage against their will. Next is the forced begging. This is a force of exploitation that can result in a human trafficking. Children can be forced to beg by their parents, siblings, guardians, or by third party, including criminal gangs, distant relatives, neighbors, or family friends. The last is the child soldiers. It involves the unlawful recruitment or use of children through force, fraud, or coercions as combats for labor or for sexual exploitation by armed forces. And that's my examples of human trafficking.
The three elements of human trafficking. Human trafficking involves the use of force, fraud, or coercion to obtain some type of labor or commercial sex act. Every year, millions of men, women, and children are trafficked worldwide. In essence, for human trafficking to occur, a trafficker will commit at least one act against another person, such as recruiting. Second, by using at least one means, such as violence. Third, for the purpose of exploiting that other person for financial gain or material benefit. A person becomes a human trafficker if he or she does any of the following acts for the purpose of exploitation. When we say exploitation, it is an act or action or fact treating someone unfairly in order to benefit from their work. First, recruit another person for the purpose of exploitation. Second is to transport or transfer another person. Transporting involves moving a person to another place in order to exploit them. A trafficked person may travel normally and legally with a passport if they are crossing a border by bus, car, air, train, or other transportations. In other cases, to prevent exposure. The trafficker may force them travel illegally and or in dangerous and uncomfortable ways, such as in the trunk of a car. Transferring occurs when the trafficked person is transferred from one person to another. Harbors or receive another person for the purpose of exploitation. Harboring or receiving occurs when a human trafficker hides or houses a trafficked person and keeps them under control in order to exploit them. The United States recognizes two primary forms of trafficking in persons: forced labor and sex trafficking. The basic meaning of these forms of human trafficking and some unique characteristics of each are set forth below, followed by the several key principles and concepts that relate to all forms of human trafficking. Forced labor. Forced labor, sometimes also referred to as labor trafficking, encompasses the range of activities involved when a person uses force, fraud, or coercion to exploit the labor or services of another person. The acts, elements of forced labor is met when the trafficker recruits, harbors, transports, provides, or obtains a person for labor or services. Sex trafficking. Sex trafficking encompasses the range of activities involved when a trafficker uses force, fraud, or coercion to compel another person to engage in a commercial sex act, or causes a child to engage in a commercial sex act. The crime of sex trafficking is also understood through the acts, means, and purposes framework. All three elements are required to establish a sex trafficking crime, except in the case of child sex trafficking, where the means are irrelevant. The acts, elements of sex trafficking is met when a trafficker recruits, harbor, transports, provides, obtains, patronizes, or solicits another person to engage in commercial sex.
Human trafficking is a global epidemic, one of the transnational criminal activities with the fastest growth in the 21st century. Human trafficking has a 150 billion industry, even though it seems like a far off issue or doesn't directly affect us. Every time we purchase something made using exploit labor, we are unwittingly contributing to the problem. The term human trafficking refers to the practice of forcing people to work against their will under cruel circumstances or little no pay. The main reason of the human trafficking that people are forced into situation of trafficking for a variety of reasons include mass displacement, conflict, extreme poverty, lack of access and employment opportunities, violence, damaging social norms like child marriage, families in desperate situation, or those who live in extremely poverty or more likely to accept the job offers. Three elements of the human trafficking: the act, means, and the purpose. So I will discuss the means or the method. The examples are force, can be involve severe physical harm or the application of physical restraint. Victims are frequently subjected to physical violence, such as rape, beatings, and physical confinement, especially the early stages of victimization when the trafficker is breaking the victim's resistance. Second, coercion involves any scheme, plan, or pattern intended to lead a person to believe that failure to make a certain action would result in serious harm to physical restraint against any person, as well as the act or threatened abuse of legal system. Lastly, fraud involves making erroneous claim about employment, pay hours, or the factors people might, for instance, travel to another nation in search of well-paying employment at the farm or factory, only to find themselves coerced into labor. So the average victim of the human trafficking, mostly women, and the percentage of human trafficking victims are under 18 years old.
Good day, sir, and I am Rodrigo Lantixi, and I am here to explain the purpose human trafficking for the purpose of exploring in one or more of the following forms. First, the sexual exploitation, actual or attempted abuse of a position of vulnerability, power, or trust for sexual purposes. Second, forced labor or services. Forced labor occurs when individuals are compelled against their will to provide work on service through the use of force, fair enough, or coercion. And the third is purpose slavery. Recruited recruit as an expensive source of labor. Enslaved Africans in the United States also become important economic and political capital in the American political economy. Enslaved Africans were legally a form of property or a commodity. And the fifth is the servitude, a condition in which one lacks liberty, especially to determine one's course of action or way of life, a right by which something, such as a piece of land owned by one person, is subject to specified use or enjoyment by another. And the last one is, or the sixth one, organ removal. Introduction. Trading for the purposes of organ removal involves removal of an organ from a person's body for the purposes of a commercial transaction in human body parts, while relating to the actual person as a subject of the transaction. That's all, sir. That's all, sir, and thank you, and God bless.
What is the current state of human trafficking in the Philippines? Cybercrime, robbery, harassment. We all have encountered or read about this kind of crimes all over the internet and the news. We have different concerns about this, and many laws have been executed just for us to solve these problems. But have you ever heard about human trafficking? It is one of the major problems across our country that many of us neglected because of many factors. In our country, Philippines has one of the largest victim populations in the world with an estimated 784,000 people living as modern-day slaves. We also reached the minimum standards for elimination of trafficking. But why we have still in the midst of having difficulties in terms of human trafficking? Any gender, any age, and any places, this crime is indiscriminate, especially children, women, and indigenous people that were deprived of attention. Estimation says that between 60,000 and 100,000 Filipino children under 15 years old are impacted by labor trafficking or sex trafficking. Types of human trafficking in Philippines. As we all know, poverty is the also main problem in our country. That's why children, any gender and age, are being sold by their parents, and we call them perpetrators. Because of fear and lack of freedom of speech, those children are unlikely to speak out. In addition, the labor code in Philippines allows parents to decide if their children can work before they turn 15. That's why we can see some children working at their young age, being recruited as a child soldier and girl sexual slavery. The Filipino government and human trafficking during pandemic. Traffickers in the Philippines have adapted to use the internet as a means of recruitment and abuse. The United States reports a 265% increase in unconfirmed reports on online child sexual abuse in the Philippines during pandemic. According to the 2021 Trafficking in Person report, traffickers sexually exploit children and live internet broadcast. Rewatch and use wire payment. Scammers, or often parents, of close relatives who force their children into online sexual exploitation. Lastly, the Filipino government has made huge progress in the fight against human trafficking. Since its initial Anti-Trafficking in Person Act in 2003, according to the U.S. Department of State, amidst the pandemic, it has continued efforts prosecuting more traffickers and educating our children about this misdeed.
Good day, I am Cadet Umambak Harvey. I'm here to report about the current situation of human trafficking in the Philippines. Recruitment methods of human trafficking in the Philippines. The most common human trafficking recruitment method is false promises of job placement. Traffickers prey on the economically disadvantaged using debt-based coercion or the promise of work to lure their victims. Many immigrants leave the Philippines voluntarily only to be exploited sexually or financially in the destination country. Employers often confiscated all travel documents to prevent them from leaving. In many cases, victims are recruited to work as entertainers, but end up being forced to work as strippers, nightclub hostesses, and prostitutes. In January 2021, traffickers fraudulently recruited Filipino domestic workers to work in the United Arab Emirates but instead forced them into domestic work in Damascus. Online recruitment is another common tactic, particularly when it comes to online exploitation of children. One of every 3 internet users of the Philippines in 2020 was a child. That increased internet usage by minors increases their vulnerability to grooming and online exploitation. Social media in particular is an increasingly common venue for recruitment. That's all, and thank you.
What is the current state of the human trafficking in the Philippines? Human trafficking networks in the Philippines. Human trafficking victims in the Philippines are both trafficked domestically and internationally. Bribing immigration personnel, producing fake travel documents, and using student and intern exchange programs are some of the main methods of moving victims. Despite the illegality of prostitution in the Philippines, many of the major tourist destinations are hotspots for the commercial sex trade, including the exploitation of minors. It is typically taxi drivers with knowledge of hidden locations who facilitate child sex trafficking in these urban tourist areas. The Filipino government and human trafficking. Although there has been legislative progress, those changes are consistently implemented and practiced. Resources for law enforcement and victims remain inadequate, and labor crimes in particular need more attention. In many states where human trafficking occurs, officials involved in law, diplomacy, and immigration processes facilitate or are themselves complicit in trafficking. Some reports are assert that corrupt officials carry out fake raids on commercial sex establishments so to extort money from managers, clients, and victims, and that embassy employees exploit their domestic workers in exchange for government protection.
The Filipino government is partnering with NGOs to identify the areas where better structures and increased funding are most needed. Organizations such as Renew Foundation and Made in Hope are empowering survivors of human trafficking in the Philippines through livelihood and skills training programs. Organizations like Together in Hope are providing anti-trafficking education to help prevent human trafficking. Organizations like Destiny Rescue and the Exodus Road are fighting human trafficking through intervention in which they partner with law enforcement to remove children being exploited in sex trafficking. Although the battle against human trafficking seems never-ending, it is the tireless work of dedicated NGOs in partnership with the local government and local law enforcement that brings us a step closer to eliminating human trafficking in the Philippines.